Thank you. Are we on? Okay. I'm not very formal, as you probably gathered. Quite appropriately described. I want to ask you all a question to start with, and you don't have to answer it, but it's set thought processes going. What does it mean to be a Christian? Is it going to church? Is it reading the Bible? Is it helping a neighbour? Is it praying? You've got to come to your own conclusions, but I don't think it's any of those. It's all of them, but it isn't any single one. We have to realise that somebody in need, it's not a matter of just helping them, because I think in the scriptures it says, deeds without love are like the sound of a clanging bell. And we need God's love in our heart before we can really do anything that's of the right motives for God. I'm going to start with, people are probably expecting a talk on Lunchbox, but we had a bit of a chat a few weeks ago and decided that it would be testimony leading into something with Lunchbox, because you've had Lunchbox before. We set up for a year and we're now 7.5 years in nearly. I'm from the Yorkshire Dales and born and bred in a little village called Massam, which is a beautiful place, but for me is a hellhole. The scenery is gorgeous, but my life as a child, at the age of 4, my father tried to kill me with a cushion over my face. Now, it didn't just happen once, it happened several times because he wanted a daughter and I was a boy. Well, at least I think I am. And, sorry, we'll try and have a bit of humour as we go along. Realising upon my father trying to commit suicide 3 years ago, a lot of things came to light. The bit about him wanting a girl at the time. I'd never known why I was so scared of anyone putting their hands near my face, even a dentist. Enclosed spaces, tight things around my neck. It's horror. It's absolute horror that only God has helped me with. I can only say that. My friend Julian, who is absolutely my best friend here, sorry Julian to embarrass you a bit, but has helped me through difficult times, and we're very close, and that's helped me, especially through the time with my father, because things have come to light which I've now explained. I've processed everything, put the jigsaw pieces together. My father was obviously mentally ill, not diagnosed, but nobody would do what he did. We were whipped with fishing rods, fiberglass fishing rods, dog leads. He was a barber, so anybody know the barber's leather? We were beaten with those, and he enjoyed doing it. He was a misogynist. Enough on that, but that just gives you a foundation of where I'm coming from. Through that, I was a quiet kid, believe it or not. I know looking at me now, maybe it's hard to believe that, but I was a quiet kid. I was scared of everybody. I was bullied at school. My introduction to primary school, because I'm ambidextrous now, I just knew I was left-handed at the time, but I am ambidextrous. My left hand was tied to the chair behind my back. I had sellotape put across my mouth because the teacher hit you and you cried and she didn't want to hear the crying and you were forced to write with your right hand. Well, now I can sign 2 checks at the same time if necessary. So all good comes out of bad. Went to secondary school and was beaten at secondary school. So you get to a point where you're scared. And a sad thing to admit, I picked up a weapon one day to a bully and I used it. Did I want to hurt the bully? At that point, I can only tell you I would have been quite happy killing the bully, which is a horrible thing to say. Fortunately, he only got a slight wound, but I found some strength. So when you hear about kids carrying knives in this day and age, it's not for the same reason as that. I did carry a knife. But then I realized that I could fight. I realized I had fists. I realized there was something out there called karate. So I took up martial arts and I studied karate in 3 different forms for 6 years. And then later on, I studied some Chinese Kung Fu. At 19, I was a bouncer in a nightclub. Let's just say because I was so efficient, I got the head bouncer's position at 19 years of age and enjoyed hurting people. By this point, I was associated with motorcycle gangs. When I say gangs, Hells Angels. I wasn't in them, but we were on the fringes. You go to their parties, you go on their bike runs, etc., etc. And there was warfare between different gangs which you were involved with. I had a deep hatred of the police when I was 19, 20 years old. I won't go into all the reasons for that. So I joined the National Front, which is racist. I also joined Greenpeace, which is a criticism in terms. But the point being was they both went on marches where the police attended, so we had a reason to fight with the police on both occasions. But I had contradicting, you can see I'm covered in tattoos. This is part of trying to be the hard man to scare people off. These sort of tattoos are home done, and they were done in prisons, not with me, but people did tattoos in prison at the time. And I put them on thinking this would stop some of the bullies, stop some of the aggression. Well, it did, 75%, but it provoked also. So 25% would see you, think you were a tough guy and want to punch up. And we're not talking, 2 or 3 punches thrown here, there, and then shake hands afterwards. I mean, it was dangerous. I met my wife in 1982, and just for the record, we are now separated after 39 years. That's a different story altogether. She's a minister with the church, she's still my minister, etc., and still my best friend. But we had children, and I carried on with what had now become criminal activities without her knowing. Bless her heart, she knew, well, she must have been so naive, she didn't see what was going on. I got involved with firearms and in organised crime and drugs with the Hells Angels gangs. The only thing that I was thinking about was selling things to make money. Money had become my boss, my lord, my king, become my only goal, because as a kid, we didn't have anything. It's not a sob story. I mean, I had a disagreement with my father when I was 13 over a pair of shoes. He wouldn't buy the shoes I wanted, which were a little bit more than what he was paying. He said, buy them yourself. And from that day, I bought everything, my school uniform, my socks, whatever it was, I had to purchase myself. It taught me a lot of things. It taught me to be independent, which sometimes is not the best place to be, especially when you're trying to serve God. Because if you've got a strength of character and you're trying to fight the thought processes in your head or in your heart that God's giving you, it becomes quite difficult. The other week, I just felt the Lord saying I had to go and do something, and I said no. And I shared it with Julian on the Friday evening, and he said, oh, are you going to do it? I said, I'll know in the morning. And getting up on the Saturday morning, the conviction was so heavy, I had to go and do what God had asked me to do, which was handing leaflets out on the streets of Leatherhead. After 14 years of marriage, we got to Easter 1996, and my marriage was finished at that point. My wife had been a Christian 8 months. She'd been praying for me, apparently while I was asleep. And I said, it's a good job he didn't lay hands on, because that could have been disastrous. Waking me up from sleep was not a good thing to do. And after that Easter Monday, I made a list of things that I could change. I was a total male chauvinist. I controlled the marriage. I was never violent with my wife, but emotional control. And I made a list of things that I could change. And I thought, I'll be blunt, I thought this will shut her up. This will keep her happy. What I didn't know was that everything on the list I'd given her was things that she'd been praying about word for word. So she knew in her head that God was actually doing something in my life. One of the things was to go to some Christian meetings. So on the Wednesday, I came in from work, oh, Colin, there's a Christian meeting on tonight. So I said, fair enough. So we went, and it was a meeting by Rob Parsons. I don't know if anybody knows Rob Parsons, but he was giving a talk on, a 60-minute talk on marriage and relationships. And he said, if you have a problem, make a list of things you could change. And I looked at my wife and I said, have you spoken to him? Well, she didn't lie, not to my knowledge anyway. And she said no, and I thought, oh. And I just knew something was happening, because this title, big coincidence at the time, So I listened to the meeting. I went to another meeting in a big church called Hollybush. Some people may know it or may not. It's up in North Yorkshire, a big Pentecostal church. And went there, and people were happy. As far as I was concerned, I was in church, so I had a blazer on and a shirt, and I don't do blazers and shirts. I do T-shirts and leathers. And people were happy, smiling, dancing, clapping, singing. And I thought, what have they got that I haven't? And I felt a tear come in my eye. Well, being from the childhood I'd had, you didn't cry. You weren't allowed to cry. And all this saying of men don't cry is the biggest, is it a misnomer, I think they call it? It's rubbish. Big men do cry. And I went outside and I made out as though I'd just gone out for a cigarette, whereas actually I was trying to dry my eyes before somebody saw me. And a chap said to me, he said, Colin, what's wrong? I said, why are they so happy? Well, they know Jesus. I said, right. Why does that make them happy? Because it gives them something to focus on, to trust in, to lean on, to be guided by, whatever term you want to use. And a few of his words made sense. And then I went to an FGB meeting. Anybody know the Full Gospel Businessmen's Fellowship? Okay, thank you, sir. You don't hear much about them now. Well, I haven't heard much about them now for a while. And it's similar to this, but they give a dinner, and it's in the back room of a pub, or it's in a restaurant, or in a hall. Not necessarily anything to do with church, and they have somebody giving their testimony. And the chap was giving his testimony, and he was telling my story. And I thought, well, this is strange. And literally the jobs he'd done, the marriage, the timings, he was telling my story word for word. And that just blew my socks off. It really did. At the end of his testimony, he said, is there anybody who wants to give their life to Jesus tonight? And I looked around the room thinking, well, it's not me. Who is it? And he said, it's all right. I know you maybe feel daft. We've got all night. And suddenly, I can't explain this. My hand went in the air. I don't remember choosing to put it up there. It's almost as if it was pulled up. They said what they call the sinner's prayer. That is a term I absolutely detest. It's a prayer of salvation. And they said this prayer and the amen, and opened my eyes, and I was expecting something. I don't know what. I don't know. Jesus to walk in front of me, or a flashing light, or an angel, or something. Nothing happened. Then he said, Colin, come to the front and we'll just pray with you. And do people here believe in the gifts of the Spirit? Do they know about them? Okay. Some of the teaching doesn't happen in our churches, but the gift of tongues, the gift of healing, etc., prophecy, these things are real. These things exist. Otherwise, I wouldn't be stood here. I can quantify that by a couple of stories if you want to hear them later on. But there's four fellas around me. I'll never forget it because one of them suffered with, I'm sure it's called halitosis. His breath was awful, especially when he said the amen. So they're praying in tongues. And now, after a lot of martial arts training, you're taught to balance on your feet. You're taught to balance on one leg, two legs, whatever, so that you're not going to get knocked down. And I'd trained in this balance technique for years. So I could feel my body going like this, and everything in me was counteracting it. I'd seen people fall on the floor in prayer, and I thought, what the heck are they doing? And people praying in tongues in Hollybush, and singing in tongues, and etc. It made no sense to me at the time, but I thought, well, that's what they do. And seeing the areas of life that I'd seen, it didn't really faze me at all. I just thought it was weird. And I could feel my body swaying, and it was involuntary. I thought it was 2 or 3 minutes, but apparently it was about 15 minutes these guys were praying. You lose total track of time when these things are happening. Suddenly, does anybody know what a scissor jack is off from a car? The old-fashioned scissor jacks, yeah? Most of you chaps will. Suddenly, it was as if a scissor jack had gone between my knees and gone. My legs went like that, and I fell to the floor. Nobody there to catch me, but I didn't get hurt at all. I was 22 stone, and I just fell straight down on a wooden floor, and I was laid in this position. Now, believe me, it wasn't voluntary. You would not choose, I wouldn't choose to suddenly lay down here in front of you chaps like that, because you'd feel a blooming fool. This happened. I know now that God had literally made me look like a corpse. We've heard the term born again. Every Christian is born again. It's not a certain group of Christians. It means turning away, repenting, and turning away from our past. Turning away from all the things that are not of God, which I believe we need to do every day. Literally, we need to ask God for forgiveness every day. Some more than others, and that could be me. I'm not the best foot walking the planet, but here we are. Fell to the floor, and these guys are praying in tongues. They're on their knees and hands and etc., just to give you an image. And suddenly my hands and everything, because I was trying to force my hands to move, my body to move, and I couldn't. It's as if I was held down by a heavy weight. Suddenly everything released, and it was like an express train going through all the veins in my body. I'd never felt anything like it. I've been drunk on many occasions. I've had drug trips, you name it. I've had thrills on motorbikes at 100 miles an hour, but nothing like this. Absolutely nothing like it at all. The chaps helped me up into a seat and explained that this was the baptism of the Holy Spirit. It was the invitation for the Holy Spirit to come into me, and suddenly I started seeing images in my head of all sorts of things. And they then explained that this was a gift of knowledge and prophecy, etc., that I would prophesy over people as my life went on. And well, I hadn't a clue. Until the next week, things kept coming in my head for people, and I would share it with them, just totally innocently, and these things were happening. These things were coming to pass. 26 years on, it still happens. The gift of tongues, they prayed with me again, and the gift of tongues happened. I didn't stand there thinking, right, I'm going to copy that guy and that lady or anything else. It happened. So I'm not going to stand here and deny that these things happen. Some people do, and that's up to them. We all probably have different doctrines. Julian and I have a bit of a different doctrine, but that doesn't stop us being best friends, working together, worshipping together, etc. It's just a difference how we see things. We're all serving the one God. Just to quantify some of the miracles that's happened, I was waiting for my friend. I lived in Birmingham 10 years. I went to train as a pastor in Birmingham. Things didn't work out. I was waiting for my friend to come to work, and he's totally non-Christian, absolutely. He's still a good mate. And he told me on the Saturday that his uncle had 7 days to live. He was dying of septicemia, and all his organs were closing down, blah, blah, blah. On the Monday, I was waiting for him to come to work, and I was praying for his uncle. I've never met him, but I was praying for his uncle. And a little voice in my head said, he's not going to die. He's going to live. And Wednesday of this week will be important. So when Dave came to the car, I told him this, and he was furious. Because obviously, who am I to tell him his dying uncle is going to survive? He was angry for a couple of days. And then on the Wednesday, he came to work, and he was worse than ever. He wanted to fight. He was just so angry. And I said, what's the problem? He said, my parents have had a phone call this morning from the hospital. My uncle must be dying. They've rushed off to hospital. Came to work on the Thursday, and he was like a little dormouse. I said, what's going on? He says, I'm not going to use his words, but he said, how did you know? And I just went, I said, God told me. I said, what's happened? He said his uncle had suddenly had a turnaround. He'd started getting better, and all I can tell you is now he's still alive this day as though we stand here, and this is 14 years ago. That God does talk to us through many different mediums. I don't mean mediums as in spiritual mediums, through the word, through nature, in our thoughts, in our dreams. We have 3 thought processes. One is ourselves, the flesh, as the Bible refers to it. One is God, and one is the enemy. The enemy is real. He's after anyone who's trying to push the gospel forwards into other people's lives. And it's a matter of realizing where the thoughts are from. To find God, you've got to find the love within the thought. What is the purpose behind that thought? But we are often deceived by the enemy, by whatever you want to call him downstairs. I won't even give him a name. We're often deceived into thinking something is of God when it's not. We really need the gift of discernment. It's one of the greatest gifts that if we don't know, we can end up in trouble and saying the wrong words at the wrong time to the wrong people. Imagine if I had been deceived by that word and shared that with Dave, and then his uncle had died, that would have turned him against me. It would have turned him more against God than he was. But now he knows that God is real. He's not a Christian, but he knows that God is real. It's one link in his chain of life. And we're all links in many people's chains, in our own families, our own environments, our own workplaces. And I just urge everybody, if you get a thought or whatever, work out where it's from and try and follow it. If you know it's of God, try and follow it. Because it's an opportunity missed if we don't. We can always say, well, God will get somebody else to do it. Well, maybe he doesn't want to get somebody else. Maybe he wants you, sir, or you, sir, or yourself. It doesn't matter who. He's picked us for a reason. I believe in this life, in the Christian walk, this isn't scriptural, by the way, but there are 3 streams that make up the river of God, as it's referred to in the Bible, the river of life. There are 3 streams. There's the natural talent that we're born with. We don't know it until we learn later on in life. You might be a singer, you might be a cricket player, whatever it is, there's a natural talent inbuilt within us. I believe that's one of God's gifts to us. Then there's the gifts of the Holy Spirit, which then enhance our natural talents. So me being, well, let's just say a mouthy character, I'm bold and I will get up and tell people that natural talent of being able to speak out through circumstances in my life which are quite horrific. Through that, I've learned to speak out. God has given me the gift of prophecy and of speaking in tongues, and this enhances my natural talent. But then that gives me what I would call, everyone has a ministry. It's not a dog collar. I'm not knocking the dog collars, please don't hear me wrong. But we all have a ministry in this walk with Christ. And the natural talent enhanced by the gift will then enable you better to share the gospel in love, either by words or by deeds, whatever it may be. Sometimes it's in absolute silence. You are just praying silently in your heart for somebody, and you'll see things change. Now, that to me is the river of God. It's the way I see it. People might disagree, and that's totally fine. I could go rambling on forever in a day. I don't know what time we've got and how long I've got, actually. But to bring all that together, first of all, are there any questions? I think it'd be a good thing at this point. If anybody has any questions, it doesn't matter how personal they are, whatever they're about, I will try and answer them. Yes, sir. Has it what? Sorry, can you? All the friends, I'll call them mates. All the mates I had when I became a Christian deserted me. My family deserted me because they thought, this is just another bubble that Colin's in. This isn't real. This is all absolute rubbish. Most of them didn't want to hear about Jesus because overnight, from that experience, I was in the pub the following day. I went to the pub every day and drank 10 pints of ale every day. I was in the pub drinking orange squash and getting a vitamin C high the first night I did it, which was quite comical. But instead of talking about me, the big I am, I was talking about Jesus, the little bit that I knew. And they didn't want to hear it. I was in their face, absolutely in their face about this Jesus and being born again and everything else. And I understand now why they deserted me. They didn't want to hear all that. You need to see love in action, not hear about it. So all those people, even though I've tried to contact them, some of them recently, have all deserted me, which that's their choice. That's their choice. I pray for them and hope that God will reveal himself to them. Does that answer that? Okay, thank you. Anybody else got any questions? Oh, okay. Yes, please.
You talked about sort of faith, showing God's love and whatever.
Yeah.
Can I lead you on to the lunchbox and other, just as an example of practical?
Yes, of course.
Practical examples
of course. Yes, no problem. Sorry, that was the next few minutes, but thank you. No, that's a good prompt. Thank you. I'll go further back. after just becoming a Christian, I went to a Salvation Army meeting in Ripon. A Salvation Army captain from East Sussex led the meeting. I don't even remember his name. He preached, he prayed, and asked if there was anybody who needed prayer, and my hand went up, and he prayed with me and very quietly said, "Colin, the Lord's telling me you're going to work with heroin addicts." And I went, "Really?" Because I had no experience of hard drugs. I'd seen what mess they could make. He said, "Just put it on the back burner." He said, "It'll happen." So I hung on to that. I tried to fulfill some of that by working. I went onto the streets of Harrogate, North Yorkshire, and helping a few homeless people. But that wasn't the answer. It came about in Birmingham, where I ended up running a street ministry for 6 years with heroin addicts, alcoholics on the street. So that led into the reality of that prophecy coming true. And when that stopped, we came down here. My wife had trained to be a minister with the church. We came down here. And I found Pit Stop, so I started going to Pit Stop, and I started helping there. I became a trustee within a month. Had many disagreements with Mr. Petty, God rest his soul. We had the same goals, but we had different paths to reach those goals. It was like Marmite, you love him or hate him. It's as simple as that. And no offence to the guy, did a tremendous work. Worked there for 7 years, and then in their wisdom, for the sake of a better word, the trustees decided they weren't getting enough people in, so they were going to close it down. I'd resigned as a trustee because of a disagreement with a housing officer who instructed us to stop giving tents out. Well, a tent to a homeless person is a shelter. They said it was encouraging homelessness. Well, I've never heard anything so stupid in my life. But I resigned because of that, and Pit Stop had to stop giving tents out. Having closed down, myself and another chap called David Putland, another Christian fella, who was also a trustee, saw that these people needed somewhere to go. So we looked around for a place to hire. We couldn't find anywhere. Then we found out the Methodist church on a Wednesday was free. I don't mean free money-wise. It was empty. So we managed to get in there, and we're still there now. We set up for 1 year as an emergency on a Wednesday. We're now 7.5 years in. And since I last talked to you, approximately, we've given out over 400 tons of groceries in North Leatherhead. The need's been there, is still there, and is getting greater. We sometimes, in fact, last time we were here, we'd bought a vehicle in faith, and I think, if I remember this correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, somebody, that the finances that you pay for your breakfast don't get given to the speaker or to that charity or whatever. But on that day, they decided to give us the money that was taken, whoever dealt with it. It was £90, and it was to the last penny, the last amount of money that I'd borrowed to buy the vehicle. I got in debt to buy the vehicle. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough when you haven't got it. And just to encourage you all, that decision with that last 90 quid brought us to the total of what we'd got into debt by to buy the vehicle. So a miracle happened in these four walls, because without that, we wouldn't have reached the total. So that decision that day, you were all acting in the Holy Spirit, and you literally fulfilled something. We were told to get this vehicle by God, not by a human being, and we found it and chose it, and it was absolutely right. So you've been involved with that. Pit Stop led a lot of people on a road where they were just reliant on Pit Stop. They are reliant on us, but we try to pray with these folk. We try to guide them. We're like a signposting centre in a way where you can guide them to something else. We get troubled people, but we don't get trouble. Unlike Pit Stop, where there used to be violence regularly, we do not get aggression where we are. We're offering a place, let's call it a sanctuary for a couple of hours. It's a place of safety. It's a place of peace where people can come and sit and chat and just be who they are for that moment in time in their week. Somebody asked us if we wanted to be, do they call them warm banks they're making now in churches? Places where people can go and sit for a few hours out of their house and keep warm and maybe have a coffee, etc. We were asked to get involved, and I said, well, no, because we're already there. We're already there, and I don't want to come under somebody else's guidelines to do what we're doing. We do what we do, it works, so why change it? It works, and people are happy with it, and people are safe with it. Any further questions on Lunchbox from anybody? Oh, it must have been an enthralling talk, Julian. Right, you're going to have to put up with me singing a song then, I think. Is that all right, gentlemen? Can I just get a drink of water, please? My mouth is so dry. Sorry. Oh, sorry, I've got some tea. Sorry, I forgot. I've got a bit of tea, that'll do. Yeah.
Living in the kingdom of light.
Yeah.
Yeah. And all our fellowship encourages us to stay there.
Yeah.
Consider how we stay there and then get dragged down into the kingdom of darkness, which
Mm-hmm.
I think we have to acknowledge exists.
Yes.
And we see evidence of that all over the world.
Yeah.
So I just said, your talk this morning has encouraged me to think about that again and think about how we all remain in that kingdom of light, in God's kingdom.
Yes. Yeah.
Thank you.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure. And the answer, if it was a question at all, is listen. Sit quietly and listen to see what's going on in your own mind. Because when you discern where the thoughts are from, then you may find that God's trying to tell you something. Right. Believe it or not, I'm as nervous as heck. Yeah. I was shaking so much before this that the cutlery on the table was actually rattling. What sort of music do you like? Do you like something with a bit of beat and, yeah, maybe? Well, I've got a couple. I was going to do this one, but I brought another one just in case you wanted it. As I walk down, sorry, off key. As I walk down life's dirty road, hear a sweet voice calling me. I hear the voice of the Lord calling out my name. Walking with Jesus, walking with my Lord. Walking with Jesus, He's the risen Word. Go tell the world about me, about my love and peace. Free them from their chains, bring them my release. Walking with Jesus, walking with my Lord, walking with Jesus, He's the risen Word. Life goes on around us, scenery will change. My Savior, my Redeemer, is evermore the same. Walking with Jesus, walking with my Lord, walking with Jesus, He's the risen Word. From the cross at Calvary, open heaven's door. The Father will forgive our sin, love us evermore. Walking with Jesus, walking with my Lord, walking with Jesus, He's the risen Word. Are you walking and talking with the Lord? Are you walking and talking with the Lord? Walking with Jesus, with the Lord, walking with Jesus, He's the risen Word. No. I have got another song if you want something more. It's not with the guitar, but only if you chaps want to hear it. Yeah? Sorry, can I just get another drink? Do you mind if I take this off? In your arms, softly sleeping, in your arms, promises keeping, guardian of my soul, Jesus, you made me whole. Heaven is my goal, and I bow down. In my praise, I bow down before you. In my heart, I love and adore you. Guardian of my soul, Jesus, you made me whole. Heaven is my goal, and I bow down. In my life, I'll try to follow, forgiven today, to try again tomorrow. Guardian of my soul, Jesus, you made me whole. Heaven is my goal, and I bow down. Heaven is my goal, and I bow down. Lastly, if anybody wants a personal talk about anything or prayer, I'm sure there's people in here who are willing to stop and pray with you. We certainly will. If anybody, and please don't think this is a hands out type of question, if anybody feels touched to support Lunchbox in any way, shape or form, please have a think about it, pray about it, make sure it's God telling you that, and come and have a word with us. Thank you.
When it was open, did you go to Right Cafe?
Sorry?
When it was open, did you go to Right Cafe?
I still do because it's still open,
It's
sir.
still open, is it?
I do, yeah. I usually take the Harley down there, but I'm trying to get a Honda that I've just bought sorted out so I can go on that.
You go down to Brighton, is it?
To the Brighton mix, you mean? I haven't been, I've been invited, but I need to find the time to go. It's just been so hectic. Okay, thank you. Thank you.
Colin, sorry, just before you go, it falls to me, can I just borrow that? Thank you. It just falls to me to say a few words of thank you for coming here today. And I'm kind of lost for words, but hopefully that won't last for very long. If we just start with the first thing that you said, I think just describing your childhood, your early life, it's an experience that would have crushed most people. And I think the great inspiration from what you've said today is that somehow you managed to find the strength, perhaps with God's help, to overcome that and turn what could have been a disastrous life into a life that has been rich and has given to others. And for that, we thank you. We thank you for coming here today. We thank you for the work you do as a charity. I had just a couple of thoughts. And one of them was, what can we learn from this? And I think one thing we can learn is that we kind of see troubles in our lives, and sometimes we think things are all on top of us. I think the message is don't give in, and listen for inspiration. And those two thoughts were stolen from me actually by yourself and by Martin. So, but apart from that, so they're kind of not original. But thank you for coming today. Okay.
Yeah, I think that's it. You're going to leave the tables up. Okay. Because I think somebody's coming to Andrew. That's right. Leave the tables up, and it would be really helpful if you could bring the crockery and stuff off the table to the hatch. Next meeting.